All right, welcome back. So now in this video, what I want to take a look at is how do we, or new issues that I should say specifically, not because we're not going to really handle them in this video, that'll be in the next one after this. But specifically, how do we, what issues are created? That's probably the best way to say it. What issues are created when the user rotates their device? Now specifically, if we're looking at it here, I've got my application and I can choose to rotate the frame of my device. But you'll notice a couple of things started to happen here, especially if we go this way. And maybe let's grab that seek bar and we'll bring him over here. Notice I can't grab that seek bar down here. Okay, are you starting to see a little bit of what's happening here? There's several problems that are happening because when we rotate our device, a lot of times we think we just rotated it. Duh, it's no big deal. It fell on its side. Deal with it, Android. But in reality, that's a pretty complicated process. In fact, let's look really quickly here at Android fragment lifecycle again. Okay, because this is where the issues are coming in. It's not just in the fragment life cycles, but also now in the activities life cycles. Okay, because when the user rotates the screen, this is going to force the application to have to be destroyed and recreated. Because we have the ability, for example, if they have a different layout for when the device is on its side. In fact, we can see, I don't know, let's look and see if this emulator has. Let's bring this guy one more time, get him upright. Let's look and see if we have the calculator. Here's a good example. Okay, if we look at the Android calculator, we have this view here, our numpad and a few buttons. It works and makes sense for when we're in a vertical view. However, when we go landscape on this thing now, notice we have a completely different view with a whole new set of buttons here. So when we go to a linear or to a rotate our device, this is all now an entirely different layout file to tell it what things to put here. We can put the similar functionality. I guess I rotated on its head. There we go. Get it back to itself. Our bars here, the user can choose to pull this tray out, so it's there. It's just invisible. That's all done through having a layout and capabilities when in portrait mode versus when in landscape mode. So part of the way that happens now is when the user rotates the device, okay, we are going to be paused, okay? This is going to give the ability for our views, if necessary, to be destroyed and recreated. So it's the first indication that, as it mentions here, that the user is leaving the fragment. In fact, if we even go to the activity layout, we can see that happens. And things that are going to be destroyed and are going to have to be recreated. So we're going to need to be aware of that and implement that on pause so that when our activity is called for one, we can save the value the user has. And then we'll be able to pull it back after we have been resumed and we've gone through destruction and are now being recreated as we go through those pieces. In fact, I would highly recommend you guys take 5 minutes, that's all it would probably take you, to whip up a sample activity. And I debated really showing it to you in this video, but I think it would be much better for you to see it and play with it than it is to just watch me talk about it. So what I'd like you to do is take 5 minutes, create a simple little activity, and all it needs to have is a fragment that's in the activity, and then just override the lifecycle events. That you can see, the create view, activity, start, resume, pause, stop, destroy, etc. Just go into generate. You can select them all at once, let them be generated, and put a log in each of those so you can see what state they are. And watch as the activity now is rotated. So you rotate the device. And likewise, the activity's life cycle is going to be following the same approach as our fragment. It's going to have to be stopped because we're going to actually making a whole new activity when things roll on their sides. So go ahead and play with that for a few minutes. Right now, before we keep going with this video, I want you guys to pause the video here, go and make those, that little quick sample. And then try that, play with it, rotate your device, and see what log messages you get through each of those life cycles so that you can be aware of, in the life cycle, what's happening as you do that. Now, I know you really don't want to take that time, but please just take a couple of minutes, it won't take you that long, and make that little sample. For reals, make it. And welcome back. Thank you. Hopefully you got a little bit of experience there with how this life cycle really starts to play into so many things now. It's such a critical aspect of Android development, but it's kind of complicated. So many developers refuse to take the time to learn what's happening and when it's happening. So I'm glad you guys took the minute there to make that and play with a little bit. And you can go back to that little demo if you save it for when you have questions about what life cycle thing happens when. So you can play with those, okay? But the short answer is we have to be aware of that. So as we saw here, we need to be able to handle, maybe laying out things a little bit differently when the device rotates or dealing with other issues there. But if we go back to our demo we had here, the reason we're getting multiples on place here is also related to that same issue, okay? If we go back to our main activity, and I did this on purpose, some of you may have noticed it while I was typing it out and said, hey, you told us not to do that. Indeed I did, but you'll notice here in my onCreate, I am adding a fragment here, okay? Not replacing the fragment, I'm adding a fragment. So every time I rotate, a new one is being added as I create, okay? So, to fix that particular issue, let's go ahead and do those as replacements instead. Notice things are still working. We rotate our device and it works. However, are you noticing an issue here? Okay, let's say I have a nice little seek bar value of 52 here, giving me an amount of $398.84. That better be one really good burrito. But watch what happens when I rotate. It's destroyed. Now, why do you think that's happening? Take just a minute. Why are my values going back to nothing? Why is my seek bar value going back to 0 and my amount now not having anything until I update my seek value? Okay. If you answered because as I'm rotating I am destroying the previous fragment and recreating it, you are absolutely correct. Because as we go through those life cycle events, those fragments are being destroyed, and they're going to have to go back through those life cycle events now to be created. So what we're going to need to do, and we'll do this in the next video, is talk about some strategies we can use to save our values before we're destroyed. And there's several different approaches we can take. If you notice when we looked in that documentation, when we're about to be paused, for example, on pause, okay? Well, probably not pause. That's probably not one to use. But when we're about to be stopped, for example, or detached, we can save our instant state so that when we come back through resume, we can now have our values in place. That's one way to do it. We're going to show you another option that also works to allow us to just store that in temporary, or into storage on the disk, to write values on the disk with an application called Shared Preferences. And we'll do that in the next video.